From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. Colombian activist Breiner Yunda Camayo has been shot dead by a police during a protest, the ONIC has confirmed. Riot police heavily repressed participants of the social Minga in the department of Valle del Cauca. This is the 24th day of protests by indigenous, campesino and Afro-descendants who demand that the government fulfill agreements regarding their lands and rights. The dialogue between communities and the government was called off yesterday as the protesters say the government has not agreed to certain guarantees. But a different dialogue table is set to restart talks in a different city. Our correspondent José Manuel Jiménez has more.
We are expecting talks to resume between the government and the social leaders in charge of the Minga Social. These talks will take place in the Valle del Cauca department, which has been the epicenter of these mobilizations. Meanwhile, we have heard about attacks by security forces on indigenous protesters. These clashes are still ongoing and have likely left many injured. But while some talks are set to restart, a different dialogue table set in the city of Buenaventura remains frozen and has not been reactivated. So we wonder how talks can resume in one city and remain frozen in another. While security forces attack protesters, earlier today there was a news conference held by the Third Via Campesina International Commission, where the results of the recent fact-finding mission were shared, in which they reject the actions of the Colombian government and the many human rights violations they have committed.
That was José Manuel Jiménez from Bogotá. And it has been over 3 weeks since the start of the protests by indigenous communities and campesinos. Let's find out more about the Minga Social and its demands.
With just their traditional batons in their hands, these indigenous people in La Delfina in Valle de Cauca have been protesting in defense of life, land and peace. The baton symbolizes their oath to defend their territory and their people. Angered by the presence of the armed forces in the areas inhabited by indigenous people, campesinos and Afro-Colombians, and the constant neglect of their demands, these people decided to put pressure on the government by blocking the Pan-American highway between La Maria and La Augustina in the southwest of Colombia.
It is worrying that the national government does not show a gesture of willingness to meet with campesinos. And we are concerned about the fact that there might be a stronger confrontation than those we have had these past few days.
The protests soon spread to 9 departments across Colombia. They call it the Minga, after the traditional collective action of indigenous communities. More than 30,000 people from about 500 organizations have joined this Minga since it was launched on March 10th. The main demand of the protesters is that the government comply with the agreements reached with the indigenous people since 1991 and guaranteed by Article 286 of the Constitution. They want their human rights be protected and their social and economic rights to be guaranteed. They also want the full implementation of the 2016 peace accord signed between the government and the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, the FARC. But instead of listening to their rising voices, the government responded with a heavy hand. In the police repression, over a dozen protesters have been injured.
The state always wants to clear their hands, and we know the state is going to manipulate public opinion. If something happens during a demonstration, the state is responsible because we are exercising our rights. The state is to blame if a comrade is killed. We are campesinos. We don't know how to deal with explosives. They cover their attacks against us to stigmatize the indigenous struggle.
The organization of Mingas is not new in the country. Since 1999, the indigenous people and campesinos have been fighting hard for their right to their ancestral land and their social rights. Their demands have fallen on the deaf ears of various governments. In 2006, more than 18,000 indigenous people and peasants protested to reject the free trade agreement with the United States and the re-election of Álvaro Uribe. In 2008, the protests lasted for 2 months and over 5,000 people marched to the capital, Bogota. In 2014, the indigenous people signed agreements with the government of Juan Manuel Santos. But what triggered these recent protests is the rise in the killing of indigenous leaders in Colombia since Iván Duque took the office of president in August 2018. Since then, more than 60 social leaders have been killed in the country. The marchers have been asking Duque to meet them and comply with the agreements reached with the previous governments. So far, no positive step has been taken by the government to correct what the protesters say is the historic neglect of the state.
Indigenous organizations in Honduras are marching towards Tegucigalpa to demand the government stop destroying their forests. The mobilization started in La Esperanza, located over 150 kilometers north of the capital, under the banner of justice, land, respect, and food for our people. Among their demands is the liberation of political prisoners and the end to the persecution of the Lenca people. They are also condemning the government of Juan Orlando Hernández for supporting the coup attempts in Venezuela and for sending so-called humanitarian aid, while his own people suffer from hunger and violence. Now to Venezuela, as the recovery of electricity continues across the country. The metro in the capital, Caracas, is up and running as service resumes. The Los Teques metro system is also working again, as well as the state railways. Work on restoring power throughout the country has been constant since attacks began on the electricity grid. Our correspondent in Venezuela, Luis Tavera, has the latest.
Un saludo para ti, para la audiencia que sintoniza.
The Caracas Metro has restarted all operations and users have said all lines are working normally. There are some areas where the public service is working a bit slower than usual, but this is part of restoration works. Cable cars are also working normally, as well as trains connecting several departments with the capital. President Nicolás Maduro has said the attacks to the electrical system are part of a plan to destabilize the daily activities of citizens. Evidence shows links between the Venezuelan opposition and the international right wing, who want to cause chaos in order to justify a military intervention. Nonetheless, the power system is being restored progressively.
That was Luis Tavera from Caracas. And throughout Venezuela, contingency plans set up by the government are active to guarantee access to food and water for all citizens. Despite the difficulties following several attacks against the country's services, people continue to resist.
Various designated areas to refuel water tankers are available across Caracas. From early in the morning, regular citizens, along with members of the armed forces, organized to distribute water to various communities. The main goal of this plan is to provide water for all citizens.
We are resisting in our own way. President Maduro, the people of La Cementera are with you. Neither the imperialist lackeys, nor Donald Trump, nor that Guaidó will win. We have a president, and his name is Nicolás.
The terrorist attacks against Venezuela's power grid, orchestrated by the international right wing and which sought to leave the country in the dark for a long time, are confronted with the people's resilience.
Right now, we need to save electricity. We can't waste any more energy. We know water will come. We know this will be fixed. What we must focus on now is on moving forward. That's all we can do.
Women led the resistance in these communities, along with their children. They stand against violence and demand peace.
Yesterday, some people were burning trees. Why are they attacking nature now? We will continue standing here. We will not allow the violent opposition to enter here.
Teamwork and social equality is made more and more visible as foreign intervention continues to intensify. Citizens condemn being victims of a violent opposition that wants to take power by any means necessary.
On Monday night, Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro talked about the latest attacks on the power grid. He said the deployment of the Bolivarian armed forces, together with the people, will ensure the security of the electrical stations.
The electrical sabotage was performed to deprive the country of electricity and water, and to put people in a state of desperation and violence, a situation promoted by small violent groups. As General Padrino Lopez and the Almirante Ceballos has informed, the Bolivarian National Armed Force is deployed, guaranteeing the protection of the electrical stations, the water tributaries and substations of the country. At the same time, the Bolivarian National Armed Force is guaranteeing security and peace nationwide. If in the middle of this situation imperialists attempt to take action against us, our Bolivarian National Armed Force are willing to continue battling for our people in my command next to the people in civic military union that will guarantee the territorial, maritime, aerial and sovereignty of the country.
In other news, heavy rains have affected more than 30,000 people in Ecuador. According to the National Risk and Emergency Services, 21 people have died since the rainy season began in October 2018. Due to the heavy rains and floods, more than 7,500 hectares of agricultural lands were destroyed and hundreds of houses were affected.
The flood has destroyed the harvest. We cannot work anymore. We don't have anything to eat. We can only work for 1 or 2 days at most.
I believe we can endure for just a few more days. There is nothing to eat. All the crops are sodden. Animals have drowned. Humans are suffering a lot.
The Uruguayan president has dismissed the country's military leaders for allegedly covering up human rights violations during the military dictatorship.
Shortly after the conclusion of the daily ministerial cabinet meeting on Monday, the Uruguayan president announced his decision to dismiss all the heads of the defense ministry and the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, José González. González was only in the position for 12 days before he was fired. When assuming the position, he had promised to improve the armed forces.
I accept the position. The National Army has reached high levels of professionalism. Now that I'm in charge, we need to continue with a maximum commitment when we fulfill our mission and activities.
The president's decision came hours after the Military Court of Honor released the report on its investigation into the actions of former military officers Jorge Silveira, Anerto Ramas, Gilberto Vázquez, Luis Maurente and José Niño Gavazzo. During the investigation, Gavazzo admitted that he threw the body of Roberto Gomensoro, who was part of the Tupamaro movement, into a river. Gomensoro was arrested and tortured to death in March 1973 during the dictatorship.
What happened for the first time over the weekend is that they openly admitted that they were involved in the kidnapping of people, the disappearance of people, and murder of people. And this happened in a direct way not only as chiefs, but they show pride in their first-hand participation.
The Court of Honor was formed by 3 former high military officers. According to court reports, former military official Jorge Silveira said Gavazzo was also responsible for the murder of another detainee and for the disappearance of Maria Claudia Garcia de Gelman, mother of Macarena Gelman, a human rights activist. Her mother was kidnapped and killed during the dictatorship.
I think this is the right decision. We can choose to ponder on how we came into this situation, or we can decide to change in order to have a proper armed forces and not the one we have, which in many ways is still linked to what happened during the dictatorship.
Confessions made at the Court of Honor should have been sent to the judiciary, but that didn't happen. Instead, the public prosecutor Jorge Diaz sent Gavazzo's confession to a civil court. According to human rights defender and lawmaker Macarena Gelman, the investigation must continue.
It is time to think about this seriously. I don't think people were unwilling, but I think we have to make an extra effort to have armed forces that are no longer linked to the dictatorship because they had a key role during that time.
It's still not known who will replace the defense minister, although there are some names being thrown around, such as Jose Bayardi, who already held the position during the first administration of President Tabaré Vázquez.
We'll take a short break now. Don't go away.
We are present at every event where our nations are staring. We believe in a new global vision, united in every broadcasting. We keep expanding our horizons and working on a closer and better communication. Now, in Grenada, Telesur, the new source from South America and the Caribbean.
Welcome back. Guyana's President David Granger has accepted the resignation of all coalition members of parliament that are holders of dual citizenship. A statement was made saying these members will not be returning to parliament when it reconvenes on April 11th. The decision comes on the heels of the no-confidence motion brought against the government, which was passed on December 2018 and later overturned by the appeal court on March. The motion is believed to be on the basis that Article 155 of Guyana's constitution prohibits persons with dual citizenship from contesting parliamentary elections. 27 nurses from 5 Caribbean countries have successfully completed specialized training to care for children with cancer and blood disorders. The nurses are from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Barbados, the Bahamas, Jamaica, and St. Lucia. They completed the oncology nursing program at the University of the West Indies at the School of Nursing in Trinidad. More than 1,000 cases of cholera and 2,700 cases of acute diarrhea have been confirmed in Mozambique. According to the World Health Organization, oral cholera vaccines are expected to arrive by Tuesday, and the campaign is expected to start on Wednesday. Cyclone Idai nearly destroyed the city of Beira, causing catastrophic flooding and killing more than 400 people in Mozambique.
Nearly more important than responding to cholera is to prevent cholera. Water and sanitation is key to this. Access to safe water cannot be stressed high enough. And once a person is sick, accessing treatment as quick as possible is of most importance. It's a sad fact to remind everyone, the young and the frail and the old, children especially, if they catch cholera in the morning, they could be dead in the evening if not treated.
Meanwhile, Chinese aid workers have disinfected cyclone-affected areas to curb the cholera outbreak. Medical aid workers disinfected dozens of rooms in 16 cholera-infected homes as they strive to halt the outbreak.
We can cut off the transmission routes and protect the families of the cholera patients by disinfecting their living quarters, food, objects, and daily supplies that they've been exposed to.
The governor of Samburu County in Kenya has been arrested over a fuel supply scandal, accused of pocketing more than $800,000. Moses Kasaine has been charged with conspiracy to commit economic crimes, abuse of power, and conflict of interests. The governor had allegedly been selling fuel to the county government through Oryx service station since 2013 without disclosing his connections to the company. Kasaine and his lawyers have not commented on the case. Algerians remain dissatisfied despite the resignation of President Abdelaziz Bouteflika. They are now calling on the entire government to leave. People continue urging authorities to let them choose their leaders through fair and free elections. Bouteflika has already announced he will resign by April 28th and appointed a 27-member cabinet to rule the country until a new president is chosen.
The resignation of the president does not offer anything to the people. We want things to happen on the ground. The people want something tangible. The people want Article 70 of the Constitution, which states that people are the source of all power.
In the Ivory Coast, the port of Abidjan in West Africa has embarked on a vast modernization project of its facilities to maintain its position and compete regionally. Abidjan Port will now be able to receive all-size conventional container ships with a 16-meter draft. This new configuration will also help reduce waiting times and enhance the productivity of the port. About $1.4 billion are expected to be invested on the upgrade by 2020. The World Health Organization has warned that the Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo is spreading at its fastest rate yet, 8 months after it was first detected. Within the past 2 weeks, there has been a record number of new cases, marking a sharp setback for efforts to respond to the outbreak. Now to other stories. Insecurity is high in the northern region of the Democratic Republic of Congo, especially in the municipality of Kivu and in the capital of the province, Goma. Our correspondent, Oscar Epelde, has more about the situation.
He ran into bandits armed with machetes and spikes. They attacked him and killed him. He was the acting president.
He was coming from a funeral. Why did he get killed? I mean, they are trying to kill the whole family.
There are Hutu Congolese families expelled from Lubero, landless farmers who have to rent rooms or live with host families.
We are the victims of the people they killed in Lubero. Before he got killed, he said at the funeral that he would keep defending his cause.
They camped outside the headquarters of the provincial government to demand their rights. They want to know if this is going to stop or if it will continue.
There were over 20 people killed in Goma last month. It was worse during the war, but insecurity is still blocking the future. People are crying out for peace. Civil society and social movements are urging the government to guarantee the dignity of the police and soldiers.
There are places where 3 police officers have just 1 weapon. Many of them are just working as guards.
After 7 in the evening, you can't even walk the streets. You're scared, even of the police and the army. We ask the government to give the police what they need to do their job.
As a sign of the changes going on, the demonstration gets through the barrier and delivers its message to the governor. They want training and decent pay for the security forces.
People continue dying.
You don't look at the mouth of someone who's crying.
The governor promises to pass on their message. He says that everyone should participate in building peace and justice. A new dynamic is needed at all levels, local, national, regional, and international. The people want to play their part and take responsibility in the face of the great challenges of building peace.
Today, Argentina is commemorating the 36th anniversary of the beginning of the Malvinas War, waged between Argentina and the United Kingdom. Operation Rosario began on April 2, 1982. It was a military move planning the expulsion of the British occupation of the Malvinas Islands after 149 years. It began a war that would last 74 days and in which 649 Argentine soldiers died. The military government used the invasion to appeal to patriotism as the dictatorship became more aggressive. Today, President Mauricio Macri and his cabinet want to renegotiate Malvinas and its sovereignty with the UK, discarding veterans and their complaints. Our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Edgardo Esteban, has more details about the events taking place in Argentina.
Hundreds of acts are taking place across the whole country to commemorate the Day of Veterans and the fallen during the war in 1982. Many vigils took place in different places in Argentina, especially in the south, in Rio Grande City, close to the Malvinas Islands, which marked the beginning of the activities organized by ex-combatants. Specifically, they want to remember that moment in which their dead fought for the Malvinas cause, but also in complex and hard present in which President Macri is trying to change government policies related to Malvinas, giving in to all the UK conditions and demands, failing not only to claim Argentine sovereignty over the islands, but also over more than 3 million kilometers squared of the Southern Sea, which is full of goods, food, and energy reserves. In this framework, the demonstrations are taking place in a very complex situation, with a government that is relinquishing claims to Malvinas, but also in the struggle over memory, truth, and sovereignty of the Malvinas Islands.
That was Edgardo Esteban from Argentina. We have more stories coming up. We'll be back. Welcome back. The Iranian government has ordered 70 villages to be evacuated in Khuzestan due to a risk of floods. At least 47 people have died in flash floods in northern and southern Iran over the past 2 weeks, and thousands have been displaced. Floods have affected at least 26 out of Iran's 31 provinces since heavy downpours began in March. The government has since announced a state of emergency. Nepal's Prime Minister Khadga Prasad Oli visited the storm-hit Bara district on Monday and met survivors. More than 30 people were killed and hundreds more injured in a severe thunderstorm that swept through southern parts of the country over the weekend. The storm, accompanied by heavy rainfall, destroyed buildings and uprooted trees and telephone poles. Pre-monsoon thunderstorms are common in Nepal during the spring season, but are rarely of an intensity that causes high numbers of casualties. Israeli soldiers killed a Palestinian man and left 3 others wounded during clashes with troops in the occupied West Bank. Local media reported that Israeli forces raided a number of homes across the West Bank during the night. The Palestinian Health Ministry said the man had lived in the Qalandia refugee camp. Israel often carries out raids in the occupied West Bank, claiming such actions are necessary. However, the Palestinian Authority says the raids breach agreements that Israel signed under the Oslo II Accord.
Around dawn, everyone heard heavy gunshots when people moved to see what is happening. We heard Israeli soldiers have been at the scene. There are some injuries, and they arrested 5 members of the same family at Qalandia refugee camp. They are living at the main Ramallah-Jerusalem street.
And with that, we come to the end of this news brief, but you can read more on these stories by going to our website, telesurenglish.net. For our viewers in Africa, you can find us on Starsat channel 461 in South Africa and 539 in Nigeria, and you can join us also on social media. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.